What's up YouTube, capital G here, aka the SalamanWRONG, and we are talking about Salamangreats in this video. What else will we be talking about? And we're going to be talking about why almost everyone in the Yu-Gi-Oh community was wrong about this archetype. And before you guys just go ahead, start rolling your eyes and say, oh, here it is, Cap G is going to make an entire video grandstanding talking about why he was right and we were all wrong, etc, etc. I do consider myself to have been wrong about this archetype in many ways. While I do consider myself the Salaman a nickname that I just made up out of nowhere, I am not infallible when it comes to Salamangreats, and there are many things about this deck that I even didn't see coming. That's why I say that basically everyone was kind of wrong about Salamangreats. I don't remember anyone coming out publicly, like early on, and just saying that Salamangreats would not only be like the most popular deck in the TCG right out of the gate, but that it would probably be the best deck in the game right out of the gates. Even I said things like, yeah, it'll be, you know, if it gets lucky, it'll maybe even win a YCS and it'll be easily like tier 1, but I never thought that it would just be like far and away the most popular deck. I never thought that it would do so well coming right out of the gate. But I want to talk about some of the reasons and then break down some of the reasons why Salamangreats are doing so well. First thing I do want to discuss is the anime and typing aspect, because this is something that I feel like long time players just constantly get baited by, and it's something that I fell victim to as well. Anime decks get a really bad rap. They get a bad reputation in Yu-Gi-Oh, and it's not for nothing. I mean, they earn it, because if you're somebody who has played the game of Yu-Gi-Oh for many eras, you understand that most of the anime archetypes are just, for lack of a better term, terrible. I mean, they're really nice in the anime and the characters duel with them and maybe they rack up a whole lot of wins, but when it comes to real life competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, the anime archetypes, especially in eras like, you know, 5Ds and my god, Zexal, where none of the characters use good decks, a lot of the anime archetypes are just terrible for competitive Yu-Gi-Oh. And when I saw that, you know, we were getting a structure deck based on an anime archetype, I thought, oh lord, another anime deck, like, you know, this is going to probably suck. However, that was a mistake, and especially for me, it's a little ironic because I'm a Yu-Gi tuber who constantly preaches this. You guys know that I've said before, Konami is actually putting forth a very legitimate effort to make the anime archetypes meta. Konami wants the anime archetypes from Vrains to be competitively viable. Altergeist with Emma, you know, decks like Trickstar, which Trickstar came out the gate as like a really good deck, or even Go, his Gokis, which eventually became meta. They just needed some real good extra deck cards, and the more Goki monsters that got released, the better, you know, Goki actually became. So the fact that the anime archetypes are, you know, historically a lot of times bad doesn't necessarily translate over to this era of Yu-Gi-Oh, but the anime archetypes are generally not going to get the benefit of the doubt just because there's so many years of history that tells you anime archetypes are going to suck. Now, when you look at the other kind of side of that, the fact that Salamangreat are also Cybers don't have a very good track record, and I understand they have a very short history in this game because they're from the Vrains era, so they're fairly new. However, when you look at the Cybers type, doesn't it just kind of feel like not only have they really not been all that competitive, I'm talking about from a holistic standpoint, I'm talking about running like a pure Cybers deck, no one really does that, and Salamangreats are the first Cybers archetype, so there really wasn't a reason to believe in them just based on Cybers as a type. Sure, there are broken Cybers cards like Firewall Dragon, but Cybers really never put it together, and if you guys don't watch the Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains anime, Yasaku exclusively plays Cybers cards, but he just kind of randomly plays a bunch of cards. He doesn't play a specific archetype or anything like that, so the fact that Salamangreats were Cybers, that was just something that made me believe that they were not going to be that good before I started playing them, because I just thought about how many other Cyber structure decks and starter decks that we got and how they never really affected the meta. So I feel like the fact that, you know, Salamangreats were anime archetype and they were Cybers, those were two reasons that people were just naturally going to believe that the archetype was not going to be strong. Then when we actually started getting the structure deck cards, I think another thing that people were wrong about the archetype on was the kind of turn one board cards that Salamangreats make, and really the recovery aspect of the deck. When you look at Salamangreats in their turn 1 boards, especially when you compare them to a lot of the other meta decks, right? You look at them and you compare them to things like the Guard Dragon boards, where you can have, oh man, you got triple negation and Gamma Seal and a Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss, maybe a Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, etc., etc. You don't think of Salamangreats in the break my board context. You don't think of them in the context of you can't play Yu-Gi-Oh! Salamangreats, for the most part, even when you get their absolute ceiling turn 1 play, which we'll generally just say is a 2-card +5 combo. If you open with Circle plus Gazelle, Circle plus Spinny, either one of those combinations, which, you know, they're both unlimited cards in your deck, they will get you a full-on +5 board, but that turn 1 board doesn't really feel intimidating. You're thinking about a deck that in its turn 1 is pretty much only going to get 1 disruption / 1 negation card, and even though Salamangreats will end on 3 monsters, none of those monsters are stun monsters. They're not going to stop your opponent from doing anything, and they're really even not beaters. I mean, you're talking about a Stalio, Jack Jaguar, also a Sunlight Wolf. These are all 1800 to 2000 attack monsters. These are not titans. They're not behemoths that your opponent's going to struggle to kill. They're just pretty decently sized monsters, but what's so deceptive about the turn 1 from Salamangreats is, number 1, Phalanx gives you extra protection, so a lot of times it's like you have to kill 4 monsters and not just 3, because if you want to take that Sunlight Wolf down or that Stallion down, man, you might have to actually attack that thing or destroy that thing twice. Also makes it so your opponent can't use like mass field removal, things like Black Rose Dragon, or even something like an Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. So the Phalanx in the graveyard gives them extra protection, and then the recovery side kicks in of Salamangreats. Salamangreats are a deck that can recover so much advantage because the deck is really designed just like zombies. It's just like a cuter version of zombies. Let's compare, I don't know, a Guard Dragon turn 1 board, right? If a Guard Dragon player makes like a huge turn 1 board and you're able to get rid of all their monsters except Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss, they're probably still in a bad position because that's all they basically have. However, if you leave a Salamangreat player with just 1 monster, for instance, let's just leave them with Sunlight Wolf, you do understand that without committing any more cards to the board, and the Salamangreat player always has Gazelle in their hand because that's part of your combo ending with Gazelle, you do realize that just off Sunlight Wolf they can recover a +4 without doing anything, right? Like, that is just insane. You're talking about activating Jack Jaguar from your graveyard to summon itself to Sunlight Wolf's link point +1, activate Sunlight Wolf because the monster was summoned to its link point +2. Let's just add back, I don't know, a Foxy or an Ash Blossom or something like that. Since Foxy was almost always reincarnation, since Sunlight Wolf was almost always reincarnation summon turn 1, it can add one of your spells and traps back. That's a +3, and then you can summon Spinny from your graveyard, and that's a +4. You're basically being able to play from your graveyard based on the advantage that you made in your turn 1. That's why you don't really see that many Salamangreat players play a whole bunch of cards to generate more offense, because when you combo out, your graveyard kind of becomes your second deck, and it's like your offense just generates more offense. So the recovery of this deck is insane, and a lot of times if you don't break a Salamangreat player's board entirely, they will simply use one of the cards like Sunlight Wolf or Stallion to recover a lot of the advantage that they lost out on, and it's almost like you really didn't accomplish that much. Next thing I want to talk about is this hand trap myth, and this is something that I really think caught a lot of players off guard. Why I felt like Salamangreats were extremely successful in their first weekend, not YCS Dusseldorf, which obviously they did well at, but even before that at the ARG and the Pro Play Games event, this whole myth, and after YCS Chicago, a lot of people were saying, man, hand traps are dead, no one's going to be playing hand traps, we can just play without worrying about anything, etc., etc. But the Salamangreat players knew that since it required so little bit of their deck to kind of start their offense, just 1 or 2 cards, they could just play a billion hand traps to actually slow the opponent down. That's why you're seeing things like Effect Veiler come back into the meta. Salamangreat players are like, yeah, this is a staple in this deck, and people are like, Effect Veiler? Like, what? That old school card from Duelist Revolution, that card that's like a decade old, you guys are actually playing that? Yes. These hand traps that are just kind of 1-for-1s, even things like Ogre outside the box, these cards, they don't really blow your opponent out for the most points, but the fact is they're generally just 1-for-1s that slow your opponent down. And in Salamangreat, since again, It takes so little bit to basically get your engine rolling that if you can use these cards as kind of the other ancillary pieces to slow your opponent down, as long as you're able to keep that turn one board intact or even keep a decent part of it, you're going to be able to recover all your resources. And it does help that obviously Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring is a card that Salamangreat players like myself love to juggle over and over and over again while playing the deck. So if you Ash Blossom your opponent once, if you're playing like something like Sky Strikers where the card's good every turn, you're generally going to use Ash 3-4 times in the duel until your opponent's just dead. And then really the last thing I want to talk about, and this is something again I was just straight up wrong about, I'm not really sure a lot of people saw coming, was the flexibility of the trap lineup. Now I knew based on the OCG that probably Salams were going to be the most popular thing with Salamangreats. I thought, personally there would be a lot of people who ran impermanences. That's what I kind of lean towards. All the Salamangreat players are going to run Rage and Roar. Those are our standard cards. But what I really didn't see coming is Salamangreat players being able to incorporate things like Artifact Sanctum and Trap Trick to make it, essentially an engine where you're always seeing Sanctum turn one to scythe your opponent, making it so they can't summon anything out of their extra deck, and then you simply kill them through an open field during your next turn. I didn't see, people playing Floodgates in the main deck. There was a regional version that actually got first place in, I believe it was like Canada or California, that played 3 copies of Gozen Match and 3 copies of Rivalry of Warlords, which those cards are fantastic against basically everything that's not named Guru Control or Cyber Dragons. Obviously decks like True Draco, Altergeist, even maybe a deck like Sky Striker, they're going to seriously struggle against those, and Salamangreat players struggle against there can only be one, but Salamangreats can run Floodgates in the main deck. I look at the Salamangreat trap lineup and I'm like, dude, there's just so much versatility there. You can run Salams if you want. You can run Impermanences if you want. You can run an Artifact Engine if you want. You can run Floodgates like Gozen Match and Rivalry of Warlords if you want, and it becomes incredibly difficult if you're playing against Salamangreats to know what that face down back row is. Should I just go ahead and blind twin twister it? Because if it's a Gozen Match, all right, I'm pretty good. But what happens if it's an Artifact Sanctum and then my opponent blows me out and ends up getting the scythe because I can't stop that? So with players playing so many different trap lineups in Salamangreats, it actually makes the deck not only more hard to read, but it shows that the deck has a lot of flexibility, and that's something that I didn't really see coming. I thought that it would just be Salams or Impermanences. The whole Artifact Sanctum package caught me off guard, and then the Floodgates in the main was something I also didn't see. But what do you guys think of Salamangreats? Were you one of those people who didn't think it was going to be a meta deck? Did you think that it would not be able to take the TCG by storm? But whatever you guys think, leave it in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that notification bell for daily videos.